Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Karen Deschaine, who's a partner at Wilson Sonsini. Karen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, Karen, you have one of the more interesting backgrounds, having gone to West Point and served in the Army for many years. Let me start by asking you why you wanted to go to West Point in the first place. Did you come from a military family or anything?
I didn't really come from a military family. My father had served in Vietnam. He was drafted into Vietnam and served just 2 years on active duty. And his father, my grandfather, was drafted for World War II, but not really a military family. My parents were school teachers.
Hmm.
I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, but a really sort of lower middle class family. And so going to West Point was a combination of needing to find a way to pay for college
Hmm.
and wanting to do something really hard,
Yeah, interesting.
and challenge myself and move away and do something also that seemed like it might be exciting.
Yeah, interesting. At what age did you decide you want to do that? Was it early or was it like pretty late in the game?
My junior year in high school, some friends of my parents from church were the dad was a graduate, and they took me out to West Point to babysit their children during a class reunion, and I kind of
Huh.
fell in love with the place.
Huh.
So I think I was a junior in high school when I decided.
Yeah, interesting. Were you very disciplined as like a student in high school and stuff like that? Because obviously, when you go in the military, that's the kind of first thing you think of.
I don't know if I was disciplined, but I was a really good student. I graduated number one in my class, and I played three varsity sports, and I was in
Oh,
the
wow.
band, and I did a lot of, I was accomplished for a teenager, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely it's not. Well, what was West Point like? Was it challenging, difficult, or what was difficult about it?
It was really challenging. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I tell people was that people don't really, I think, understand is that it is super competitive in a way, at least in the 90s it was. Everything was ranked and judged and a competition, everything from, your fitness to your military grade, which is kind of like how good of a cadet you were. And then
Hmm.
obviously the academics were very rigorous.
Hmm.
So it was just like 4 years in a pressure cooker of competition and leadership training.
Hmm. Now, did you relish that, or was it, did you maybe regret it after you went there or anything like that?
I think I don't regret it. I certainly don't regret it now. I mean, the where I'm at in my life, kind of who I am as a person, I think was really formed during those 4 years.
Yeah.
But sometimes I do think there's an easier way to do it. I could have probably got to a very similar place, albeit as a different person, if I had gone Army ROTC, for example, and been able to have a more normal college experience.
Yeah.
But also, I'll say, like in the 90s, the class was about 10% women, which, looking back, it was lonely. It was kind of lonely.
Mm.
And so actually my daughter is getting ready to graduate from the Naval Academy and in a couple weeks. And when she first talked to me about going to a military academy, I really tried to influence her not to.
Mm.
To if she wants to serve in the military, I'm super proud about that, but do it in a way that maybe is a little more fun. But I will say she has enjoyed the Naval Academy immensely.
Oh, interesting, interesting. Well, what made you decide to actually pursue the career in the military after that, or was that your goal from the very beginning?
I think it was one of those teenagers that sort of saw the opportunity of West Point and the prestige and the challenge and the rigor and the credential as my biggest motivating factor to go
Yeah,
there. And then the
yeah,
military was sort of something I thought what I would just do after. It was I didn't think about it a whole lot.
yeah.
When I graduated, we had a 5 year active duty commitment. I ended up serving a little more than seven,
Okay.
and I loved the Army. I loved
Oh,
leading
interesting.
soldiers. I
Huh.
every day on active duty, I really, really loved it. And it's been more than 20 years now, since I've been out, but I still look back really fondly on the opportunity that I was given to lead soldiers. And it's the thing I'll be proudest about forever.
Oh, interesting. Well, what did you do during your whatever 7 years you said you were there?
Yeah, so I was branched into the finance corps branch of the military, and I chose that because I really didn't think I would like the military. And I thought it would sound good on my resume and that I would be a business leader someday.
Hmm.
The finance branch is not what it sounds. It's not what civilians would think of as finance. It's really more of an HR function
Hmm.
in the military around military pay.
Hmm.
I My first duty station was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was a disbursement officer. Believe it or not, this was 1997. I ran like a little bank where we
Hmm.
had money, and soldiers could come and get what we called casual pay if they were down on their luck or having a hard time paying their bills. We could give them advances on their pay. I also out of my little bank, I wrote checks to vendors and things like that on U.S. government checks.
Hmm.
Then I went to Korea where for I served in Korea for 1 year. I was the chief of military pay in Yongsan, which is right in Seoul.
Hmm.
And in that case, I sort of ran the military pay function for most of the peninsula.
Hmm.
And then I came back and I commanded a airborne finance company at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's the 126 Bravo company guidon behind me. That's from my time as a company commander.
Oh, interesting.
And then the last thing I did in the Army was commanding a recruiting company in Los Angeles County. And
Oh,
that was the job I did for 1 year before I went to UCLA for law school.
oh, interesting. Now, it looks like you, before we leave the military topic, it looks like you also did quite a bit of parachuting. Now, what was that all about?
I did, yeah. So at West Point, everybody's an athlete. I actually walked on the track team to be a high jumper.
Uh-huh.
The truth of the matter is, I had no business being a high jumper in Division I track. I'm 5'6". I was like pretty good for a high school high jumper in the state of Michigan, but I was not going to be good on the college level. And so an opportunity came up to try out for the skydiving team.
Hmm.
And so that's what I did, and that was my competitive sport for the rest of my time at West Point.
Wow.
We competed on an intercollegiate level. I actually was the national collegiate skydiving champion my sophomore year at West Point. We also did demonstrations. We jumped the game ball into Army football games. It was a fun way to sort of fulfill my competitive sport requirement at West
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
And then I was a paratrooper in the military. I was airborne. I actually was a jump master.
Wow.
And that relates to the 4 years that I served at Fort Bragg in airborne units.
Yeah, interesting. I take it you're not afraid of heights then.
I almost have a inhuman non fear of heights.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a little bit
Well,
of an adrenaline junkie, particularly when I was young.
well, so after this very interesting military career and everything, and sounds like kind of a sort of a childhood dream fulfillment, what made you decide to go to law school?
I always saw myself landing in law school, and the reason is kind of funny now, given what I do. But I always thought that I'd be a politician.
Oh,
I thought
interesting.
I would serve in the U.S. Senate or Congress, or maybe even run for president of the United States when I was little. And
Huh.
most of those people are lawyers, and so I always had law school on my radar. But then while I was on active duty, actually, I got my MBA through an executive MBA program at Auburn University.
Uh-huh.
And in that experience, I really kind of learned that some of the legal aspects of business were the most interesting to me, securities in particular.
Huh.
And I saw myself being able maybe to add the most to a business or corporate career with the my leadership training, but also my like training regard and experience regarding managing risk and things like that. And so
Huh.
went to law school with the intention of being a corporate lawyer.
I see. So you never dabbled or tried to do any litigation, or did you ever do any of that in law school or as a young associate?
I'm one of those lawyers who never wanted to be in a courtroom. I don't want to be on the jury. I don't want to be a judge. I don't want to be a defendant. I don't want to be a prosecutor. I really never wanted to be in a courtroom. I did my first summer in law school. I interned for a small litigation firm in Santa Monica, but
Uh-huh.
not just because it was hard to get 1L internships.
Interesting, huh? So what is your practice like today? It sounds like what? Do you work with little startups? It's a corporate transactional practice, but what kind of practice is it?
Yeah, I have a general corporate and securities practice. I exclusively represent life sciences companies,
Uh-huh.
and from time to time investors that invest in life science companies, primarily therapeutics development companies. Some you
Huh.
would call them biotech, but
Yeah.
also med device diagnostics and some tools companies.
Huh.
Um, and I represent private and public companies both. A lot of my practice is a securities practice, whether it be venture fund, private investment, IPOs, public offerings. And most of my clients, I would consider me, I think they're outside general counsel.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
represent them from startup or from first funding until exit. And in the therapeutics development space, in the space that my firm practices, those companies generally are acquired either before or after going public, but they're generally acquired before being commercial.
Yeah.
They get gobbled up by big pharmaceutical companies who then do later stage clinical trials and take the drugs to market. So
Yeah.
mostly pre-commercial therapeutics companies.
Interesting. Was the life science focus something you wanted to do, or did that just kind of stumble? Did you just kind of stumble into that focus?
Purely geographic. Yeah. After law school, I only looked to move to San Diego to be close to family. And that's sort of the industry, particularly for lawyers that practice with high growth companies in San Diego.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really the primary industry.
yeah. So how do you think now, looking back, how the military background, either the West Point or being in the military, how does that, influence you as a lawyer? Does it have any impact on you in the way you practice or how you live your life or anything like that?
Yeah, I think some life experience is good for this career. I imagine it would be very difficult to be a general corporate lawyer who's really seen as like a strategic advisor in most cases without having some life experience. So I think any life experience, work experience is good. I think the military, there's a lot of things that I think I bring to the practice that have been super beneficial to me. I mean, a level of professionalism, obviously, but also the ability to handle a lot of stress
Mm,
and time management skills and being able to look at and assess and address the concerns or issues or views of many different constituencies. And that's a skill that I got particularly through commanding companies
yeah.
um, and being both tasked with achieving a mission, but also caring for soldiers. And I think those skills translate well into a corporate practice.
Yeah, totally. Are you still pretty active alumni for West Point? Do you do the reserves or anything that's even like slightly military related at all?
I don't do the reserves, and it's interesting. I was not particularly active in the alumni organization for many years. I had a little bit of hard feelings about how hard I thought West Point was,
Mm,
um, and then moved to the other coast and got disconnected and left the military after seven plus years of active duty. And a lot of people stay longer, and so I got sort of disconnected from it that way too. But probably in the last 5 or 6 years, I've gotten really involved again. West Point Alumni Association has an entrepreneur initiative, and
mm.
so I have been active in that. And then went back to West Point a few years ago for my 25th class reunion, and I had not been there in 25 years. I had not been on
Wow.
campus,
Wow.
and it was an amazing experience. And I'm so sad that I waited 25 years to reconnect
Mm,
with my classmates again.
yeah.
Really was very meaningful to me, and I'm glad I did it. So I'll be back every 5 years now. And then because my daughter's at Navy, I went to the Army Navy football game this year, and I've
Yeah.
been like at Navy a lot on their campus, which is kind of a fun, interesting experience. People always say to me like, "Oh, your daughter followed in your footsteps," and I respond with, "Yeah," in the most contrarian way because she went to the biggest rival school. Like when I hear her say "beat Army," it sounds like people saying "Happy Christmas." Like it doesn't even my brain doesn't register it. Yeah.
Do you do any parachuting or jumping at all now, casually or
I
recreationally?
don't.
Oh,
It was really fun when I was young. I pretty much stopped doing it when I had children.
okay.
Um, and it's not a casual sport. It's not like golf where you can
Yeah,
show up
yeah.
at the golf course and you'll find people who are willing to play with you. Skydiving is a very cliquey group, and like
Mm,
because you can't show up at the drop zone with your parachute and be like, "Hey, anybody want to jump with me?" Like that nobody's doing that. Like it's too dangerous of a thing, and people have too big a variety of skill sets, and so you have to either do it and really do it and you spend all weekend doing that every weekend, or you kind of get disconnected from it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, interesting. Well, Karen, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time to share your story. It was super interesting, and thanks again for doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Karen Deschaine. Thanks.